that most people that are on this call have heard something about stem cells in the news, but may not be aware of how they are currently being used to fight some age-related chronic diseases and some types of cancer, and even more. There are many, many hundreds, if not thousands, of clinical trials going on right now. And our team at Cenegenics has been very interested and encouraged by recent advances in stem cell research and therapies, and how these cells might be stored and then be able to use later as the research and the treatment continues to develop. In fact, there's some really interesting studies and clinical trials that are going on in this country now about how to treat patients that have heart disease by using their stem cells to regenerate heart muscle, increase heart vascularity, and improve the electrical function of the heart. So that is really exciting stuff, especially when you consider that heart disease still remains a leading cause of death in the United States. And if you know anything about Cenegenics, you know that we are about disease prevention, and this is what we consider to be really at the forefront of disease prevention. So the purpose of this webinar again, is to really give kind of a Stem Cell 101 training, and I hope by the end of this presentation that you have at least a cursory understanding of what stem cells are about and how you may be able to get that sort of insurance for yourself and for your family. But, Tiffany, before I turn it back over to you, Lindsay, could you one more time tell the people that have recently joined the call how they could pull up the PowerPoint if they cannot see it?
Yes, at the bottom of your screen there will be a little blinking, it's a green tab, and it will say Meeting Viewer. And when you log in, it should just pop up, but if it hasn't popped up, just click that tab and it should bring the presentation right on up.
Great, thank you. So, well, that's exciting research to hear what all is going on with, regenerating heart muscle and all of the clinical uses that, will hopefully in the future be available here. So we're excited to hear that. So can you just begin to explain in simple terms exactly what stem cells are?
Sure. I'm going to do my best. The first thing to remember is that stem cells are what we call our master repair cells, and they are cells that are found in all organisms, and they have the ability to divide and differentiate into many, many, many diverse specialized cell types. And they can also self-renew or self-propagate themselves to grow even more stem cells. Now, I'm kind of a sports fan, and I particularly like football, so I like to sort of think of it as like a free agent in football who's is a football player who's not really committed to a specific team. And stem cells are kind of like that. They start out being uncommitted to a particular team or a certain kind of organ, and then they can become differentiated, and they can form, for example, blood cells, nerve cells, cartilage cells, skin cells, and then they are committed. And that happens in our body, and it can also be kind of proliferated or made to happen in the lab so that they can be directed to form certain kinds of cells both in and outside of our body. So that's kind of a quick overview, and what is exciting about them is that they regenerate themselves. So this makes stem cells very appealing for scientists and doctors who are trying to create medical treatments for replacing lost or damaged cells.
Oh, that was a really good football analogy. I've never heard that one before.
Good.
Yeah. So, well, and from what I've understood, doing some research myself, looking into this, there's two major different, categories of stem cells being considered for research and therapeutic purposes. So I've learned about the embryonic stem cells and the adult stem cells, and I'm hoping you can explain the difference between the two.
Yep. Let me try here. And this is where some of the confusion has come up, I think. Embryonic stem cells are stem cells that are derived from actual embryos that are developed in vitro from fertilized eggs donated for research purposes. And these embryo or embryonic stem cells are then used to create more stem cells. There's been a lot of research for probably 15 or 20 years on these kind of embryonic stem cells, but currently they're not really being used in any, at least in this country, in any ongoing therapy using these embryonic stem cells. So we're not about Cenegenics. We're not really talking today about collecting or using embryonic stem cells. What we are talking about are the stem cells that are called adult stem cells. So after we're born, all of us, our stem cells continue to be produced in bone marrow and circulate throughout our bloodstream and in our tissues and organs. And these cells at that point are considered adult stem cells, regardless of the age of the person. So we can actually get adult stem cells from a newborn, from a child, from a teenager, or from an adult. The principal difference that age makes is really in the quality of the stem cells circulating in your blood. So younger patients have more stem cells and better stem cells in that they can differentiate more easily and they can proliferate more easily. And they are more likely to be free of any oxidative damage or of any mutations. The best source really is probably umbilical cord blood, and that's becoming increasingly popular because that really is the youngest blood. So it hasn't differentiated much. There are a lot of them, and they are in the best health. That's really the best you can get is from the umbilical cord of a newborn baby. So we continue to produce stem cells throughout our lives at a relatively steady state. Now that can be influenced by things like your overall health, by exercise, by vitamins, by the kind of food you eat, by if you have a virus or if you're ill or something like that. They're also affected, as I said earlier, by your age. So once you reach your, I'd say 60s to 70s, the number of cells that are being produced begin to diminish, and they're just not quite as vital as they were when you were in your 40s and 50s. Being healthy and physically fit is a very important factor in the quality of the stem cells that's circulating. So you would not want to, for example, I have a cold right now. This would not be a very good time to collect my stem cells. Fortunately, I've already collected mine when I was feeling really great last year.
Yeah, that's a really good point about having to be really healthy and having your body in balance and, trying to be in the best shape before collecting your cells, and a very good reason to come in and get your executive health assessment before collecting. Can you explain the two types? So no, we just talked about the embryonic stem cells and the adult stem cells. So now it gets a little bit more trickier because we have two types of adult stem cells. So if you could go just a little bit more detail into that, I think it might clear up some confusion for people.
Right, sure. And we're particularly here talking about using autologous, which are our own adult stem cells, rather than using them from a stem cell bank. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Just like with a kidney transplant or anything like that, if you can get it your own, if you can get it from someone that's closely related to you, it's much better than getting, say, a transplanted organ from somebody else, because you have to go through that, making sure your body doesn't try to reject it. But back to the adult stem cells. So there are really two main types. There are the hematopoietic and the mesenchymal or mesenchymal adult stem cells. The hematopoietic stem cells are known for their ability to reconstitute the entire blood system by producing more red blood cells, white blood cells, dendritic cells, platelets, T cells, B cells, all of these cells that are really in our bloodstream. These cells are the active agents in a bone marrow transplant. So really, Tiffany, we've already been doing stem cell transplants for quite a while, particularly for leukemia patients who receive bone marrow transplant. That is really a stem cell therapy. And this has been going on for probably at least over 25 years. And the other well-characterized population of adult stem cells is called the mesenchymal or mesenchymal stem cell, and that is a mixed cell population that generates bone, cartilage, fat, fibrous and connective tissue. And these type of stem cells are being used also, particularly in regeneration of skin for skin transplants or skin grafts. So that, again, is another form of stem cell therapy that is already being used all over the world and has been for quite a few years. And then if you look at this slide, you can see the sources of the hematopoietic stem cells as well as the mesenchymal cells. So we can get those from the hematopoietic from cord blood, from bone marrow, from peripheral blood, and the mesenchymal we can get from cord blood, bone marrow, placenta, and then from adipose tissue or fat. And so that extra little amount of fat you have around your midsection in the very near future can be used for stem cell therapy. So I don't know, does that help a little bit? I think the next thing we're going to try to visualize exactly what happens with those stem cell or the stem cell dynamics.
Yeah, that's our next slide. So if you want to explain that a little better.
Sure. Well, if you're looking at this slide, and hopefully you are, again, there's two major classes of stem cells, the hematopoietic and the mesenchymal. And the hematopoietic differentiate to produce blood and immune system cells, whereas the mesenchymal differentiate to produce tissues and organs. Now, what we need to keep in mind is this slide is dated before we even put it out there, because the developments that are happening in stem cell therapy are happening every hour all over the world. And so we used to think that certain cells could only form certain kinds of cells. But now the science is advancing so much that by using different kinds of growth factors, the lines are blurring and they're not quite as well defined as they are in this particular slide. But it gives you an idea of the different types of tissues and organs as well as different sorts of blood cells that these stem cells can be used for. If you're interested in a list of current adult stem cell clinical research trials going on in the U.S., I recommend that you visit www.clinicaltrials.gov. That's www.clinicaltrials.gov. It's really pretty fascinating, the number of active clinical trials at all different levels that are going on in American research institutions.
Great. Yeah, I've looked at some of those studies, and the research is just extremely promising. And, when you consider banking your stem cells, I think it's so interesting that, if you bank your stem cells, let's say tomorrow, you get the full range of cells banked, so you have opportunities in the future to use whatever you need that will clinically best suit your needs for any issues and therapies that come up in the future. So it's really exciting.
Right, and that's the... Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm talking about banking cells. I mean, really, I think of this as being one of the best forms of insurance that we have, because we know that the best stem cells are your own, A, and B, because this field of medical research and medical therapies is advancing so much that what now the uses that are available will probably be 100-fold even 5 years from now. So you talk about great insurance. I mean, this is the best thing that you can do.
Yeah, well, that leads us right into the next question. Why should someone consider banking their cells and also banking their family members' cells?
Sure. Well, first of all, you should choose your own because you want the best chance of success if you receive stem cell therapy. And we actually, Cenegenics is involved with a privately held stem cell bank which collects and stores autologous stem cells, and that is collected from your own peripheral blood. The thing about your own stem cells, they are a perfect match for you, right down to your DNA. Now, your family members share the same genetic and immunological factors, family members, but they're not quite as good as your own. But the best you could do would be the umbilical cord blood, because it's important for all family members and will be very close to your own particular blood. So for those of you who are going to be grandparents or having your own child, it's one of the best gifts you can give someone is to give them banking of their umbilical cord blood when the baby is born. Now, public stem cell banks collect from a lot of different other patients. So, from donors. So basically, let's say that I needed to have a stem cell therapy. of some sort, maybe a bone marrow transplant or something like that, and I did not have my own stem cells available and I did not have a match from a family member, I would have to go to the National Stem Cell Bank and see if there is a match in the bank that would be as compatible as possible for me. So even with a match, the cells are still identified by my body as being foreign. So I would have to take immunosuppressant drugs, usually for life, after treatment with these stem cells. And I'm always going to be at a risk of having those cells rejected or attacked by the body. And when taking the immunosuppressive drugs, then you put yourself at a slightly increased and sometimes a much greater increase of contracting infections and viruses and bacteria. Excuse me. Plus, here's the thing, there is a waiting list, and it can be considerable. It's considered to be at least 6 months waiting list for a public stem cell bank, and it's extremely expensive. It is about between $50,000 and $70,000 to procure stem cells from a stem cell bank. So it's a little more complicated than people realize, and this is an opportunity to at least consider having those stem cells banked for yourself.
All right. So just talk for a second about the benefits and potential uses, down the road. What are they looking at, and how, if I did bank my stem cells, sometime in the near future, how potentially could it help me down the road?
Sure. Well, let me talk about a couple things that are going on now, because I know people are joining us as we speak. Right now, there's a private hospital here in town that is using stem cells from fat to help diabetics who have lost sensation of blood flow in their extremities for their toes. So that's going on right now in a private hospital in Charleston, South Carolina. Cenegenics Medical Institute is in negotiation with a group that is affiliated with UCLA, using stem cells, 1, to regenerate heart tissue and revascularize the heart, and 2, to regenerate cartilage. Again, if you've in an injury, say to a knee or to an elbow or something like that, where cartilage, rather than having surgery, the stem cells are injected and then proliferate into cartilage. Other uses of stem cells, many of these are in clinical trials and are being used all over the country. I will say right now that worldwide there is more advanced stem cell therapies going on, not quite as many hoops to jump through as in this country. But I would say at the top of the list are treatments for Parkinson's disease, spinal cord injury, stroke. We're hopeful about Alzheimer's, diabetes. That is a big area for regeneration of the islet cells of the pancreas. Crohn's disease. There are several studies going on in this country looking at Crohn's disease, osteoarthritis, again, bone marrow transplant. So a lot of things going on really all over the country. And as I had said earlier, we at Cenegenics Medical Institute have been very, very interested in this for a number of years and are working hard to make these kinds of therapies available to our patients.
Gosh, that is so exciting. So, if I wanted to bank my stem cells, what would be the next step? How would I get involved, and how do I get more information, and what would you recommend doing?
Sure. Well, we have been working, again, with pioneers really in the field of stem cell therapy and stem cell storage and regenerative medicine. So let's say that you personally wanted to bank your cells. First of all, you need to call our office at Cenegenics Carolinas, which will share that information with you at the end of the call. If you're already a Cenegenics patient and you're in good health, great. The next step would be to fill out a form for enrollment and for medical approval. If you're not a patient, we need to talk to you about the next step, because it really, you want to only bank your cells when you're in tip-top condition. Once that has happened, you've filled out an enrollment form, medical approval, you've had an evaluation, then you would be scheduled through the lab that we're affiliated with Assure Immune to schedule a convenient blood collection at your home and then have it sent to their lab where it will be processed and preserved. And it's a very intricate process and very high-tech method of handling and extracting the stem cells, which I'm not going to go into right now, which you probably wouldn't want me to anyway. And we've even had some patients who have had like their children and family members, and everyone has their blood drawn kind of at the same time, so that because this is a great thing to be thinking about, for you and your kids as well.
Wonderful. Well, this has been extremely informative, and I think you've sparked the interest for some of our listeners, hopefully, to take a closer look at collecting their stem cells sooner than later. So we'll go to the next slide, and I'll let you close.
Okay. And I wanted to, for those people that are on the call that don't know really anything about Cenegenics, or particularly Cenegenics Carolinas, is that, we are an age management medical program, and that means that we are about keeping us as physically and physiologically healthy and young as possible, and part of that is by disease prevention. And one of the things that we do besides focus on exercise, nutrition, lifestyle, and hormones is to be really trying to get at the forefront and on the cutting edge of therapies and research that are going on to help us to stay healthy as we move through life. So this is a benefit that you get from the program, is knowing about these sorts of opportunities that are going on really throughout the world. So I recommend that you think about banking your stem cells and those of your family sooner rather than later to get that kind of insurance in place. And again, just remember that, we're here to answer your questions, and the only way that you can assure that you have a supply of adult stem cells when you need them is to bank your own and your family's. Not only does this really assure you the source, but it assures that you have a match in the future. So I'm hoping that you found this informative. I know it's a lot of information, and hopefully it's cleared up your understanding of stem cells, at least as the first step. So I want to thank you all for attending, and don't hang up yet, because we do have time for questions. So Tiffany?
All right. Thank you, Dr. Barber. Dr. Barber and Tiffany will now be accepting questions from the audience. If you would like to ask a question, I will unmute all of the lines. I can't unmute one single line, so everyone will be unmuted. Just, feel free, just announce yourself and ask your question. So at this time, I'm going to unmute all the lines.
Any questions out there?
Hello?
Hello?
Hi, this is, hello? Do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
This is Ophelia. I'm one of the physicians here in North Carolina. My question is about the price. How it's the price for one person for banking?
Well, we weren't going to get into pricing at this time. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I believe it is about $2,000 for the first draw. There's a different price for, if you do a group. And then there is a storage fee that is under $100 a month to store that over the long term. But there are different prices depending on whether you want to pay, all your storage fee up front, or if there are, 3 people or 2 people or whatever. But it's about $2,000.
Okay, and it's one draw. One blood draw?
Well, we recommend. I've had 2 done myself. I mean, the more you have, the better. It depends on how many stem cells they get from your. It is recommended that you have more than one.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
I have another question. So I missed part of the webinar of the conference. So basically now everything that it's done in terms of therapeutics is investigational, correct?
Well, in this country?
In this country.
Well, that's not really true. I mean, there are some private practitioners who are using stem cell therapies now. Those are not necessarily FDA approved, and those have nothing to do with us. But there are many practitioners in this country that are using stem cells for different uses because let's say, for example, you went into a doctor's office who was doing stem cell therapy, and they drew your fat out and processed your fat. They could use it potentially therapeutically. That is not what we're talking about at this point in time, though. We at Cenegenics are only considering becoming affiliated with an investigational therapy. But there are a lot of clinical trials. There are about 2,000, I believe, in different levels going on in this country right now.
Wow. Okay.
Well, and
so we don't know when it's going to be offered, basically, an FDA approval.
Well, I would say, knowing the different levels of the clinical trials, some of them will be within the next year or two.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Right. And I heard, I mean, I've seen centers in Germany. I've seen centers in Mexico also.
Right.
So sometimes, people opting to go in different parts of the world to have it done.
Oh, yeah.
How about COPD and stage COPD?
I'm not really aware of any particular. You would think that would be somewhere down the line. But I think once you start getting involved with the lungs and stem cell, because of the filtering ability of the lungs, it's a little different. It depends on where you inject the stem cells and what kind of growth factors. But I've not seen a lot published about using for lung disease.
Okay. How about advanced cardiomyopathy?
Oh, yeah, definitely. In fact, that's one of the studies that's being done at Cedars-Sinai at UCLA.
Okay. And facial rejuvenation, probably.
Oh, definitely. Breast augmentation.
Right.
I mean, it kind of boggles the mind, really.
Right. So it's very interesting. And but mainly it's like the cartilage regrowth, neurologic diseases, cardiac diseases that I heard about, right?
Right. Parkinson's.
Parkinson's.
Diabetes. Islet cells.
Right. How about renal insufficiency or renal failure, liver failure also?
Yeah.
Do you know anything about it?
I don't. Those are not listed as the ones at the top of the list. I mean, the number one really where the advances are going to come most quickly and where it's going to be available is really, I think, in heart disease is at the top of the list. And then Parkinson's is pretty close behind that.
Mm-hmm. Right. And what centers do you know any centers to name a few that are more interested in cardiac stem cell therapy? Or like the Parkinson's?
I don't off the top of my head. I've looked them up, but if you go on clinicaltrials.gov, I mean, there are tons of them. Tons all over the country. The Mayo Clinic's doing them. I mean, a lot of Johns Hopkins, and they pretty much, it's like anything else. Each center kind of has their own thing that they're focused on.
Thank
Good
you
questions.
so much.
Other questions out there?
Any other questions? All right. Well, if that's all and we don't have any other questions, I will announce some of our contact information. If you do come across any other questions tomorrow, or if you have questions about pricing or anything else in particular, you can please feel free to contact Dr. Mickey Barber directly at 843-577-8484. Or you can email her at mbarber@cenegenicscarolinas.com, and that's MBARBER at Cenegenics, and that's CENEGENICS-Carolinas.com. You can also register online at our website at www.cenegenicscarolinas.com. Cenegenics Carolinas is open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And again, you can reach Dr. Mickey Barber directly at 843-577-8484. Thank you so much, and have a great evening.